For the past year and a half, Canada has been embroiled in a scandal that its politicians are doing their very best to cover up, hoping that Canadians, and the rest of the world for that matter, will eventually lose focus and look the other way. But a recent report from a Canadian government overview committee has brought the story back into the limelight, revealing that many of Canada's politicians who have denied involvement are, in some cases, willing participants, while others are being blackmailed after allegedly being caught on camera committing some less than legal acts. And this is something that impacts every Canadian directly, putting their confidence in the strength of Canada's democracy into question. And honestly, this is the report that's stirred up so much dirt. It's called the Special Report on Foreign Interference in Canada's Democratic Processes and Institutions. A little bit of a snooze of a title, but it has some killer dirt inside of it. Now, this report was given to the Prime Minister of Canada back in March, but it only just became public, albeit in a very heavily redacted version. Now, this was put together by something called NSICOP, that's the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. This is a big group of Canadian politicians that were given top secret security clearance so they could actually evaluate what Canada's intelligence agencies were telling them so that they could then report that to the House of Commons and make whatever changes they needed to for national security reasons. Now, there are a lot of problems with this committee that wrote the report. One is that everybody's appointed to this committee by the Prime Minister, and the fact that they hold top secret security clearances means that they have to be bound to an oath of secrecy, facing hefty jail time if they leak any of the redacted information, but we'll get more into that in just a second. Now, one of the biggest revelations of this report is that previously we just thought that there were nations interfering with our elections, but we're largely unsuccessful in doing so. In this report, we find out that there's actual members of parliament who are sitting in the House of Commons and the Senate who are willingly going along and willingly working with these foreign agencies to sort of serve their interests instead of the Canadians that they're supposed to be serving. We'll get to that in a second, but let's first take a look at the who. They're talking about who are the nations that are engaging in such activities. We've got, first off, China, we've got Russia, as well as India, Pakistan, and Iran. As of 2019, those were the biggest actors, but things have changed now as of 2024. These days, it seems that Russia is less of a player in Canadian interference, and instead, India has emerged as the second most significant foreign interference threat to Canada's democratic institutions and processes. Okay, so these days it's largely China and India who are most heavily interfering in Canada, but what are they actually doing? This first one might not be surprising, but the second one absolutely is. It's not that much of a shocker, but it seems these foreign nations are manipulating traditional media to disseminate propaganda and what otherwise appeared to be independent news publications. That's not so surprising. Of course, we're going to have nations that are coming in and trying to get their interests sort of talked about in a way that might make Canadians more sympathetic to them. But what was more shocking to me was that it seems that Canada's biggest news organizations are tightly tied up in this as well, saying that China was the most capable actor in that they interfered with Canadian media content via direct engagement with Canadian media executives and journalists. So the CEOs in the executive suite of some of the biggest organization in Canadian media, it seems that there's direct engagement with these individual nations along with journalists, and they go on to explain exactly how this goes on, with China paying to publish media articles, and those media articles being posted without any attribution or note of the sponsorship, as well as sponsoring media travel to China and also pressuring journalists to withdraw articles and creating false accounts on social media to spread disinformation. Now, the report that the Prime Minister saw wasn't redacted like this, and there's a bunch of specific information about who and when this happened, but it seems like this goes from the bottom all the way to the top executives, possibly even involving Bell and Rogers, Canada's biggest media companies with, let's face it, oligarchical tendencies, right? Organizations that would seem to be key targets to control if you were looking to steer a nation from behind the scenes. But what's insane is that this revelation is only the second most shocking revelation from the report, which we'll get to in just a second. This is one that directly implicates a lot of Canadian politicians. But along these media lines, this really makes me wonder to what extent this story is being suppressed. I mean, when I caught wind of what was in this report and what we're going to talk about in just a minute, I was absolutely blown away that I hadn't heard about it constantly on the news or even constantly from every neighbor on my block. It seems like this is something that people should be talking about, but so far it's not getting a lot of coverage, and I wonder why. But this is what I find interesting, because whereas over the past year and a half, this story has been framed as third-party countries using propaganda and hidden networks of individuals to influence election results, well, now we're hearing that there are currently sitting members of Parliament and members of the Senate who are willingly engaging and participating in this interference, whether it be for financial contributions or political support or, and listen to this, or to stop possibly career-ending information from being released about them. In other words, blackmail. And we see it in this report. Some elected officials began wittingly assisting foreign state actors soon after their election. It goes on to report that CSIS currently believes that China and its relationship with some of our members of parliament rests on a quid pro quo relationship, i.e. You get something and we get something. Everybody benefits here, whether that be to help people politically by getting them more votes or getting them the nomination in a riding so that they'll then be in power come election time, or financial contributions. It seems like CSIS believes that there's a lot of sort of exchanging of favors going on here. And it seems that one redacted network individually had contact with at least 11 candidates and 13 campaign staffers, some of whom appeared to be wittingly working for the People's Republic of China. But this is all a pretty clear trade, right? You give me financial or political support, and in turn, I'll not support Canadian legislation that doesn't serve you foreign nation, your interests. But here it gets a step farther, or it goes a step further into possible blackmail. Take a look at this. The report claims that foreign actors have targeted federal parliamentarians to collect information to support potential future efforts to coerce them. Foreign actors have also intimidated or pressured parliamentarians who they perceived as having taken political positions counter to theirs. It goes on to say that this information is being gathered on parliamentarians in order to exert influence on them through various people and groups in Canada and abroad. And here we have a fully redacted section that says the paragraph describes that China has made efforts to collect information, including compromising information on numerous federal actors, including from every Canadian political party and both houses of parliament, both the House of Commons and the Canadian Senate. I think this is absolutely mind-blowing. It seems that based on this report, that groups connected to China have tried to collect negative information about Canadian politicians from all parties and from both of the House of Commons and the Senate in order to be able to exert pressure on those individuals lest their dirt make it out into the public. It's classic blackmail, right? But things start to get even crazier when you start to connect the dots between the new information in this report that just came out, and connect the dots between that and a high-profile news story from 2020, as well as some incredible investigative reporting that's currently being done by a man named Sam Cooper. And as a quick little disclaimer here for my own protection, all of what I'm saying here are just allegations. Nothing has been confirmed in a court of law, and if this is true, much of this information would likely have been redacted and removed from all of these reports in order to protect national security interests. So with that being said, don't assume that what I'm saying is true. You can do your own research on this and come to your own conclusions if you'd like. As always, the sources that I use in this video are all included in the newsletter that goes out exactly after each of these videos. You can sign up for that in the description. Back in 2020, you might remember seeing headlines about a massive police operation near Toronto in which the police raided a 53-room mansion where an illegal casino was operating. I mean, take a look at some of these images from this video posted by the York Regional Police. Inside of this giant 53-room mansion was a fully operational casino outfitted with a full
Guys
staff
in the
of
front, they're
wait
still doing
staff
their
as well as
GT rooms.
bartenders. Inside, they found $1 million in Canadian dollars cash, as well as $1.5 million worth of high-end alcohol. And there were slots, there were gaming tables, mahjong tables. They also found a fully loaded assault rifle, multiple different handguns, a whole bunch of shit. And a representative of the York Regional Police also outlined other illegal things that they found happening. Listen to this.
Gamblers had access to accommodation, spa treatments, high-end food, and beverage services. Human sex trafficking is also suspected and is under investigation. The top floors of this 53-room mansion were searched, which revealed several additional VIP tables, a full-service spa with employees and clientele, and a massive chef's kitchen with a full menu, including contraband items such as braised shark fin available.
So a lot of sketchy stuff going on here. Not only were there illegal substances or illegal foods being served, braised shark fin, but there was also a fully operational spa, and he also mentions in the same breath the sex trafficking that they believe was going on here. I'll let you make your own conclusions there on what was happening in the spa. Now, this was a shocking story at the time, no doubt, but nobody then would believe how this gambling ring could be connected to foreign interference and Canada's most powerful politicians and business leaders. Remember this spot in the report, number 46 here, where they described that there were efforts to collect information, including compromising information on numerous federal actors, including from all political parties in the House of Commons as well as the Senate. Well, it turns out that this compromised information collection could not just be from a politician's past, like going back and finding things that they wouldn't want getting out, but it could also include the leading of Canadian politicians and business people into compromising situations, where those compromising acts could then be filmed and used as leverage. And it seems that this casino could very likely be one of those operations where you're bringing in Canadian business people, Canadian politicians, getting them to do less than savory activities and then using that as dirt against them. Listen to this clip from Sam Cooper, who's the investigative journalist who is an expert on this situation. He frames it in a really interesting way. And this clip is from a great podcast called Brave New Normal with Jason James. You should check it out. And you should also follow Sam Cooper's reporting by going to thebureau.news. And I kind of have built up a trust with Sam Cooper in that a lot of the things that he's reported have then come out 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months later in major news articles. He seems to be at the forefront of exactly what's going on with this interference situation.
So to jump to the chase, I'm saying underneath the election interference story of China trying to influence our politicians, they are actually trying to own our politicians and have them by the scruff of the neck through relationship compromat. So compromat could be you're doing sketchy financial deals with a person, you're leveraging their greed, getting them to take bribes or getting them into, side deals in another country. Or it could be, the oldest profession, as you know, is called prostitution. And so it could be a sexual compromat. Chinese intelligence was using this facility allegedly to corrupt or attempt to corrupt Canadian politicians who were very prominent visitors underground to this wealth club or VIP club or, underground casino. CSIS came to believe that the concern was Canadian politicians could be captured in compromising relations on camera. This casino was allegedly a brothel, and this could lead to blackmail.
So the casino gets raided, and the York Regional Police seem to realize that, hey, this might go way above our jurisdiction here. It could have broader national security concerns after they find these tapes. So they take the information to CSIS, Canada's Security and Intelligence Service.
What was revealed on the tapes raised the concern that Canadian politicians, who I can't name, but I'm told and believe are involved in the Toronto election interference network that's tied to the Chinese consulate, could be captured in ways that would give leverage to Chinese Communist Party agents. And so York Regional Police don't have the mandate or the laws to investigate that kind of concern. It's a national security concern. They believe they contact CSIS in Toronto and say, we think you should look at this. And CSIS has to file a warrant.
So these tapes were brought to CSIS saying, hey, maybe you should take a closer look at this. But CSIS, of course, can't take this police evidence without obtaining a warrant for it. But this warrant process from CSIS, well, they didn't process that warrant for months. And eventually the case falls apart and CSIS never gets their hands on these tapes.
CSIS believes that they should be able to obtain the evidence. And yet they apply for the warrant. And I'm told by a senior intelligence source that warrant is just gathering dust. Once it's sent from Toronto to CSIS headquarters, it's shelved for about 2 months. At the end of the day, all that matters is the case bizarrely falls apart with the Crown withdrawing criminal charges against the primary suspect. That person gets their video content back, and CSIS has lost the opportunity to put this in front of a judge.
Now, allegedly, the reason this case fell apart and all of the charges from operating this underground casino, the reason that they were dropped was that some luxury watches that were on the property and were in some early photos all of a sudden didn't appear in some later photos and couldn't be located by the police. And that led the accused individual's lawyers to claim that someone in the York Region Police Force stole those watches, which apparently led CSIS to drop the case. Now, this all sounds fishy to me, and I don't know what to think about it, because remember, I'm just some idiot on the internet. So you can draw your own conclusions on this, but it seems, at least to me, that if I were a nation that wanted to gain control over another nation, I'd probably want to be able to coerce that nation's most wealthy and influential people, and the best way to do that is through blackmail. It reminds me, and might remind you, of the whole Epstein situation and the network of very wealthy, influential Americans who were tied to him. Some people say that Epstein and those connected were just bad people doing horrible things just for the sake of doing those horrible things. However, more and more people are believing that this was part of a similar operation where a nation's intelligence agency sought to control powerful people by holding salacious footage of them over their heads. So I personally think it's very possible that something similar is happening here, where a state-sponsored network is working to gather blackmail to exercise control. Now, I also think it would be pretty naive to assume that these foreign nations and organizations are the only ones doing things like this. I personally don't doubt that our national security organizations are running similar operations in other countries where we seek to gain leverage over the direction of a different nation, or at the very least, the direction of a powerful organization. Blackmail is extremely powerful. And it's not, and even if it's not Canada doing it directly, I'd imagine there's a small chance that the national security agencies of our closest intelligence allies, largely the US, Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom, well, I think it's pretty likely that they'd be doing something pretty similar. But again, that's all just speculation. Either way, this NSICOP report, which I'll remind you was put together by parliamentarians about their peers and their peers' misgressions, this outlines how today there are currently sitting members of parliament that are tied up in these interference activities, whether it be of their own choice for personal gain, be it financial gain or political gain, power gain, or the result of dirt being gathered against them. And the awful thing is, I don't think that we're ever actually going to get the names of these members of parliament, and I think that they'll likely continue to be in power over the long run. The tricky thing with this NSICOP, this committee of parliamentarians, is that even though they get security clearance to review all these documents, they then are bound to secrecy. They cannot say anything to anyone, including other members of parliament who might be able to make some changes or take these people out of power if they're heavily compromised by a foreign state. Now, when confronted about this, the current Liberal government says that they can't share the names of the people who were involved in this. They do have the names, NSICOP has the names, but they can't share them due to national security concerns. But I'd want them to tell me this. What's more of a national security concern? The names of politicians who are actively engaging with foreign nations and failing to serve Canada's best interests? Is that a bigger threat? Or on the other hand, is it more concerning to you that more and more Canadians are losing faith in our electoral system and losing faith that the politicians who are supposed to be serving them and supposed to be serving Canadian citizens are actually serving the interests of other people? What's more of a risk to you, sharing these names or having a generation of Canadians lose faith in some of the most important national institutions? Honestly, I don't know what to think about all of this, but I'm curious what you think about it. Let me know down in the comments. What have I missed here? What have I gotten right? What have I gotten wrong? Am I totally off base here, or do you think that I'm on to something in following these connections? I'd be really curious to hear what you think about it. If you haven't already done so, subscribe to the channel. Again, all of the sources that I use for these videos, I send out to subscribers who are subscribed to the mailing list, which you can do so in the description and get all the sources from this video, the reports, and all of the different podcasts and articles that I've cited throughout. Also, if you want to hear me get my thoughts out in less of a structured way, I have a second channel where I'll put out maybe 45 minutes to an hour of me just talking offhand about this sort of stuff. Far less structured, but it helps me get my ideas out there. So if you'd be interested in more long form content like that, you can check that out at the Russ Matthews Show, and I'll put a link to that in the description as well. But with all of that said, thanks so much for watching this video. I really hope it helped you out at least a little bit, and I'll see you next time.